Doing an interview for the Oro Valley Historical Society with former Mayor Paul Loomis. The date of this is August 3rd, 2021. And I gave Paul a list of some questions to think about beforehand, and we're going to cover most of those. The first question, sort of before you even got into this, is why did you decide to run for local government election?
I decided to run for election because I thought I could help the town grow in a controlled growth type manner. I'd gotten involved with the town right after my property was annexed in 1995, and the property next door to me was planned to be apartments. And so I learned how to work with the town, and I tried to refer the zoning on that property to the voters, and ended up suing the town and losing the lawsuit for a mandamus action to change the zoning. And basically, because I was annexed into the town at that time, during that same annexation, I was not notified of any of the information that was going out or any of the agreements that the town made with the various landowners in order to get their signatures on the annexation agreement. So that was part of the challenge that I had, in that I didn't have standing in the town for them to recognize my protests.
Mm-hmm. So you were elected in 1998 and served through 2010, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, 3 terms. You were the first elected mayor. What do you see as the advantages of an elected mayor over the previous system of electing the mayor from the council?
Well, what it did was it provided some continuation of the leadership over time. Previously, the mayor was elected annually by the council, and so that every year you could have a different mayor and different leadership for the town. But having the mayor directly elected by the people provided at least for a single term of leadership, rather than going from one to another.
Okay. All right. Some of the issues I'm going to ask you about are kind of a repeat of what we talked last time, but I think we should get it on tape, maybe, just so you can express your opinion. But one of the big controversies, and it started, I think, right after, either about the time you became mayor, was the whole issue of Tortolita creating an incorporated town.
Right.
A small area west of the town, very sparsely settled, and they, for a period of time, existed as a town, and then eventually the courts overturned them. Why did you oppose that? Why do you think most of the council opposed the incorporation?
Well, they never really existed as a town. The county never recognized them never recognized their incorporation. And Tortolita was, as you said, a very sparsely populated piece of property. And they had some special legislation at the state that allowed them, that was only applicable to Pima County, and it was only really applicable to the area of Casas Adobes and Tortolita in order for them to become towns. And The main challenge that Tortolita had was they felt that they could survive on state shared revenue, that they would not, they didn't have any sales tax base, and they were not going to have a property tax. And so the concern that Oro Valley had, that we as a council had, and the region had, was how would they be able to provide city services to their residents. Mm-hmm. And so that was the main reason that we opposed them. And Oro Valley was not unique in opposing Tortolita. Basically, you had Marana was opposed to it, and the city of Tucson was opposed to it, and the county they were neutral, which I think that they had to be. Mm-hmm. But so what you had was we were opposed to Tortolita because we didn't feel that they would ever survive. And at the time, the small incorporated towns that were surviving on state shared revenue were going bankrupt. And the League of Cities and Towns ended up sponsoring legislation to provide a minimum payment mm-hmm. to those towns of a certain less than a certain population, where they got a fixed amount rather than an amount that was shared based on population. So it ended up that the cities and towns agreed with the incorporation of Casas Adobes, mm-hmm. but disagreed with the incorporation of Tortolita. And I believe it was Tucson that provided the leadership in the lawsuit challenging the legislation that was ultimately decided by the Supreme Court, saying that the legislation was unconstitutional.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Another big political issue that sort of went through that same time period, actually. My research shows that it really went almost over a 10 or 12-year period, was the Honeybee Canyon question. And in a way, it was really two different disputes. The original dispute was about land that was just to the east of the intersection of Honeybee and the Rancho Vistoso. And then the second controversy was about Stone Canyon and the development of the golf course and the resort and the houses that were further up. Why do you think people were so agitated about that?
Well, as the Honeybee Canyon was definitely two specific cases, and the first part was the Honeybee Canyon Estates, which are just west of Honeybee Canyon, and their property made it all the way to the edge of the canyon. And so that the conservationists were very concerned about access to the canyon and a buffer area between the canyon and the residents. So that that particular discussion was going on from pretty much 1992 all the way up through 1997.
Right, that was kind of just before you were really on the council.
Right. And then the other part, basically, as part of that concern, was apparently when the original PAD was approved by Pima County, there was a promise to protect Honeybee Canyon. And the question was, what is protection? What is a buffer zone and stuff like that? And so that was ultimately agreed to, and Honeybee Estates were developed and were platted and developed with a space, with something like a 50-foot buffer between the canyon edge and...
Well, it was 1,000 feet from the middle of the canyon, you know.
On either side.
So basically 500 feet in each direction, yeah. Okay, the second one is more in your time period.
Right.
You were right in the middle of the second one. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
The second one was related to the rezoning of Stone Canyon. They're basically amending the PAD for Rancho Vistoso, allowing them to put in the golf course and make changes to the golf course area. And as a result of that, we negotiated with the property owners, with Vistoso Partners, to allow them to build and adjust their buffers for the golf course. And we formalized the agreement for the buffers in Honeybee Canyon and an area that was called Neighborhood 12. Mm-hmm. And basically, those areas were were dedicated to the town as a result of the rezoning.
Okay, but towards the, after this went on for 3 or 4 years, the county stepped in and they basically took over the issue, did they not? And then came back and allowed you to annex it later.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Is that basically the neighborhood 12 was in the county. It was owned by Vistoso Partners, but it was basically a section, and as part of the agreement, they had to annex into that neighborhood 12 into the town.
Okay. Water was always an issue. Started really in the early 1990s. There were kind of two separate issues that were developing. One was the access to the CAP water for potable water for people to drink. And the other issue was the use of the effluent water. What sort of things had to happen to make those things be resolved?
Well, for those two things, basically, if you go back, maybe this will be a different question, is the accident is acquiring the water companies themselves for Laurel Valley. That was a significant event. But in order to, the two issues of CAP water and effluent were basically two issues, because effluent was managed by Pima County, and the CAP water was managed by the city of Tucson. So we basically needed to conserve our groundwater due to the state requirements for assured water supplies, and that the 25-year plan was that we could not draw more water out of the ground than was being recharged into the ground. So that we needed to be able to bring the CAP that was allotted to Oro Valley from I-10, and we needed to bring effluent into the town to use on lawns, on grassy areas, and on golf courses.
Right. And ultimately, around 2005, a pipeline and a piping system was built from somewhere way down near Ida Road all the way up to, ultimately, to Sun City. Mm-hmm. It eventually ends in Sun City.
Right.
who paid for that? Because I have not been able to really clarify. It eventually cost around 23 million. Did the golf courses pay for it?
No, the town paid for it. The golf courses paid for the bond service, the debt service, as part of their water rates and all. But the initial development of the pipeline, which was basically from Arthur Pack on Thornydale up to Tangerine Road, and then from Tangerine Road down to La Cañada, and then down to the El Conquistador courses, and then from along up Moore Road, or up La Cañada to the Stone Canyon golf courses, and then put in a reservoir and a pumping station to get to Sun City as well.
So in essence, the golf courses have been paying ever since by the rate that they're paying for water.
Correct.
Okay. It's really hard to find these things explained anywhere.
Yeah.
In a lot of newspaper articles and a lot of minutes that I've gone through.
And as part of that, there is a alternate water surcharge on everybody's water bill, so that every part of your water bill pays for that as well.
Okay. There was and I think we even talked, Tweak and I talked about this when we were meeting a week or so ago. There's always been a big emphasis ever since the Sheraton came in back in the 80s of wanting to get resorts and golf courses in this community. Why was that? And what do you think was the impact of all of that?
Well, the challenge that you have being a town is your sources of income, and so that your sales tax, you have state shared revenue, which is based on population, and then you have your sales tax, which is based on your commercial development. You have a construction sales tax, which is based on growth, and then you have your bed taxes and for hotels, resorts. And so what you're looking at with resorts is both sales tax benefit and a bed tax benefit. And so that is the value of having resorts, that basically a resort doesn't require a lot of tax, and most of those services are provided by the resort itself. And so that it's the town gets significant income from a resort with low expenses associated with it.
Mm-hmm. There were a lot of articles starting to appear in local newspapers starting around 2000 that golf courses were in trouble, that less people were playing golf. Golf courses started to have bankruptcies starting around 2006, and it went on, almost every course here had some kind of problem with that. What was the reaction in the town? Do you think golf courses ultimately are more a problem than a solution?
They are a challenge. Golf courses are a challenge, and especially municipal golf courses. Private golf courses are also a challenge. They're the ones that don't have the benefit of additional subsidies. So that, first of all, you see the private courses having problems before you see municipal courses having problems. But you also say that, okay, a golf course is pretty, it's hard to say that a golf course benefits a large majority of your residents, whereas a recreational park is open to everybody. You're limited with a golf course, and a golf course is expensive, especially in Arizona when you have to water the grass.
Do you think that there was some point where the people on the town council began to realize that golf courses were going to be a financial problem to the town, or was that something not really anticipated?
Well, it was during my time, it certainly was not anticipated. One of the first things I learned was to not get into the golf course business. And this was from talking with the mayor of Eloy at the time, as they had just taken over a golf course on the south side of I-10. And he said, we were having lunch at the League of Cities and Towns conference, and he said, don't ever get into the golf course business. And I told him, I agree with you, and don't ever get into the waste management business either, or the sewer business. Let somebody else do that, because the requirements change on a weekly basis of what you need to do as a government.
The sewage here is largely controlled by the county.
It is managed and controlled by the county, totally, unless you have a septic system. The entire sewage system is county managed, and that's due to an old agreement between the city of Tucson and the county, and then the other cities joined into that. Marana, basically, they just started their own sewage system back around 2010, 2012 timeframe, and they're doing it.
Annexations is the next kind of topic. I think that was on our list originally. Oro Valley has been aggressively, I think it would probably be safe to say aggressively pursuing annexations since about the time of Rancho Vistoso. Sometimes it ebbs, sometimes it flows. Do annexations, what are the reasons for annexations?
Well, your reasons for annexation are to provide for additional city and town growth. Basically, if a town, as I said, the towns depend on certain types of revenue, and with an annexation, you get additional population, so you get additional state share revenue associated with the annexation. You also may get sales tax if the area that's being annexed has commercial areas developed or possible areas that can be developed. And so that what you are looking for in an annexation is something that's going to benefit the town, but also benefit those residents. And so the town provides additional services that are not necessarily provided by the counties. But it's primarily related to how big do you want the town to be, and how much growth do you want it to be. But if you're going to grow and be able to manage that growth and afford that growth, you either have to get additional population, additional revenue sources.
Do you think residential areas by themselves are ultimately revenue gainers for the town in the long run?
It can depend on, it depends on the density of that residential area. Right now, most of the areas that are targets for annexation are open land. Is that in Pima County is sort of a unique county in that they have a large residential population, whereas most counties do not have that. If you look at the Maricopa County, most of Maricopa County is incorporated into towns.
Right.
Whereas Pima County is still largely residential
But
and unincorporated. And so that Pima County has adjusted its services to act like a city or town, whereas it really doesn't have that authority. It provides a sheriff service versus a police service. And, you know, those are two different types of service normally.
do you think in your time the standards for planning that Oro Valley had were roughly equal to what Pima had, better, worse?
Well, they started off as, you know, basically when the town was incorporated, they had to use Pima County planning standards.
Right.
And when they developed their own standards, they modeled their standards after the standards that were developed in Scottsdale. And so that the town standards were much more stringent than the county standards. And we had a development review board that, in addition to looking at the architecture, it looked at the quality of the architecture and the quality of the development, rather than so that there was a lot more overall quality requirements in our planning documentation.
So when you're saying they looked to Scottsdale, you're talking about probably back in the early mid-'80s.
Correct.
Okay. And then they
And
added on to that.
then they expanded them as necessary for what the town wanted to do.
Do you think it was a mistake to get rid of the development review board?
Personally, yes. Is that it was, you know, I think it did provide a service. It provided a level of quality that is not necessarily required anymore. It added additional steps that made the development much more expensive and much more time consuming, but I think the overall community profited from that.
That was after your time, though, when that was removed.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, we were streamlining the process when I left, but we did not eliminate the DRB.
What about all through the history of this community from the very beginning? There's always been the discussion in the background of real estate property tax. When the town was created, they promised people there would never be a real estate property tax. It comes up in political elections here every year. Different people accusing other people of favoring the property tax. Do you think the decision, you know, again, this is just sort of, you know, all the way in the past, but do you think the decision to not adopt a property tax at the beginning was the right decision?
That's an interesting question of an idea. I think the idea of not having a property tax is nice. I think that I think that they may not have been able to incorporate if they had proposed a property tax.
Yeah, I'm from what I've read, pretty much sure that it would never have happened.
Right. And I think that now, if they were going to do a property tax, it should have been done in the early years. I think that nowadays there's too many people that are, and too large of a population that is satisfied with the tax bill that they have and with the amenities that are provided. I think, unfortunately, as we continue to grow and not necessarily have the sales tax to support it, and if we become more and more managed by, or we, as the government, as the town budget continues to grow with the services that we provide, that the question is going to come up is, how do you pay for the services that are desired? And the sales tax is not going to be adequate to do it. I think that the construction sales tax is a one-time tax, and your bed taxes aren't going to be able to support the level of services that current people are used to.
You were mayor during two pretty big recessions, 2000, 2001, and then the one that started in 2007 or 2008, but in a way went on all the way 4 or 5 years later in its impact. What are the problems of trying to govern with the sales tax in the middle of a recession?
Well, you're dependent on the sales tax pretty much to pay for your increases in services and pay for inflation needs. And when you're not getting those sales taxes, then you have to cut back on the services that you're providing, or you try and basically what we did was we froze all our new work and didn't hire any new people.
You mean public works such as
new facilities? Is that at the time we were looking at expanding our public works facilities. We were looking at park improvements and things like that, so that you basically you had to decide where you were going to spend the money that you were going to get.
Okay. This question kind of goes back a little bit before your era, but I want to ask you about your approach to being mayor. There were many recalls that occurred in that period. Well, I think one of them actually overlapped when you were mayor, like in 1999, but there were 4 or 5 different attempts at recalls. Some of them were successful, some of them weren't. In the 90s. What was the cause of that?
Well, during the 90s, you had significant growth going on in Oro Valley. You had significant changes going on. You had the community was changing from a demographic of Sun City and college professors to medium-age engineers, medium-age families, mostly second home or the second purchase of a home, upgrading of homes, so that your demographic was changing significantly as the population increased. And so that what you ended up having was, when we were small and just developing and hadn't annexed as much, the town of Oro Valley has always had significant public participation.
That's a nice way of putting it.
And when things are not don't satisfy a group, then the recall process is one of the ways that groups are able to provide their feedback. And so that it's, as your population grows, it becomes harder and harder to recall people as you require more and more signatures. But back in those days, it only required 100 to 1,000 signatures to get a recall on the ballot. And so that was a way to provide feedback, and the public was definitely participating.
I read a number of things, and I've spoken to a couple of people that said that when you became mayor, you created an atmosphere that was better.
Right.
And I guess the question would be, what did you do to create a better atmosphere?
Well, I think part of it was the recognition that I was going to be there for 4 years, and I tried to give everybody a fair chance and let everybody participate, let everybody provide their piece and work towards compromises. Our council meetings went on for in many cases they went on for 4 or 5 hours because we did allow public participation. And I allowed the council members to debate the issue much more than currently occurs. But it was, and we had a lot of study sessions as well that were separate meetings, and so that on anything that was controversial, we had the opportunity to debate and discuss it until people were ready to make a decision, rather than be forced to make a decision before the decision makers were ready to make that decision.
And some of these things were different than had operated by previous mayors.
Yeah, is that, basically a lot of the mayors basically managed by forcefully pushing things through without discussion, without, it was not, it depends on personalities and styles of how you run a meeting and how you feel that the job should be done.
So there were many, many cases where, particularly after about 1995, where the general plan mandated that major changes to land use, something that had already been zoned, required a general plan amendment. And that kind of emerged in the mid-90s there, because before then there had been basically just zoning changes, of all types. But the 1996 plan mandated a whole set of procedures and such, and started that. How did you approach? What factors made you make up your mind when someone came asking for a general plan amendment on a piece of vacant land that had, say, already been zoned for one house for every 3 acres?
Right. Well, it depended on what the location was and what the general plan had identified for that particular area. And when we did the general plan in '96, that was a significant change in general plan style from what had been required in the past. And so that there was a lot of public participation in developing that plan. And so it sort of provided a whole new foundation for the general future of the community and the region. And so that what you had to do was you looked at how that change meshed into the surrounding community, and whether or not was there, rather than simply saying, if you're putting in apartments next to a suburban ranch, they don't really mesh real well, and that was part of, as you had to integrate, how does this development fit in with the rest?
Another controversy that went on for a number of years was the establishment of the Naraha Park, which they called the Naraha Town Site originally. We talked about before was a sand and gravel pit and an asphalt plant sort of in there at one time. The town, during your time, proposed a bond issue. The town, around 2017, proposed another bond issue. Both times they were pretty strongly defeated by the public. What was the cause of the resistance to that park?
Well, that goes back to, there was no resistance to acquiring the property and for a park. The resistance was, how do you develop that park and how do you pay for that development? And the challenge that we have as a town without an existing property tax, if you're going to go out for a large bond that is going to be paid for by a secondary property tax, it has to be voted on by the people. And for that large of a development, you ended up having to say, okay, this is going to be the first property tax that Oro Valley has. And so that for the first issue, the question was, okay, do you do the whole thing as planned and do it all at once? And so that caused a significant dollar figure, and so it was and you still had a large number of residents that remembered or that had signed the incorporation petitions that said, you promised there would never be a property tax. And by doing this, you're creating that property tax. And so that was, there was a lot of hesitation by the public and saying, do we need all this stuff? Why is it this expensive? And the real issue that you have to remember is that site is close to 200 acres, and there's a large amount of infrastructure that needs to be done in order to make it in order to develop it. And so
water and sewer,
roads, parking, sewer, all of that infrastructure has to go in as well, so that in order to put in a baseball field properly, you have to provide the infrastructure. And when they put in the first fields and stuff, they put in very limited infrastructure. Say like when the first development for the archery range, and I think it still uses porta potties.
Right. In both cases, in the time when you were mayor, and then again in the 2015-16 period when they did a bond, they held public hearings. They had welcome houses where they displayed the plans. They went through all that. The people who showed up at the meetings were favorable.
Yes.
So the question is that why do these things fail?
Well, because as the town grows, the proportion of people that attend town meetings is a smaller portion of the overall population. And the same thing with participation. And so that, like now, if you did a recall, it would require a couple thousand signatures. Whereas back in those days, it didn't, and earlier days, it didn't. And what you had when you do open houses, you have the mostly special interest groups attend those open houses. Mm-hmm. And so that the people that are attending are the little leagues, the soccer leagues, the swimming teams, and stuff like that. And so that they're in favor of it, but the rest of your population is not as involved. Mm-hmm. And so that they are looking at it, okay, how does this change affect me? And I don't have kids, I don't play ball, I don't do these activities, or I have all those activities are provided as part of my homeowners association. So that there's a big difference there, and you have to, and that's why it's so important to try and get the message out to everybody and let them make the decision.
Kind of leading, because in each one of the, in each one of those cases, political action committees were formed to oppose or to favor. I think in both cases there was a favor group and an opposition group. And it strikes me that from the time you got involved in 1995, 96, to where we are today, politics has really changed in this town. What do you see as the big changes in the way elections and politics take place?
Well, the elections take place like they have always taken place. The politics associated with it is significantly different. You have challenges associated with raising money for if you're a politician running for office. It's gotten much more expensive. As you have to do advertising, and advertising is not cheap. So that nowadays you have a lot more teaming up of candidates. You have the issues pretty much stay the same, but the candidates are working together as a team versus as individuals, and so that you see a lot more of a team, one team of candidates versus another team of candidates.
Are these teams based on, the Democratic and Republican Party, or
not necessarily? Mm-hmm. Is that they're normally focused on support of certain issues. What are you in favor of, big government or little government? Are you in favor of recreation services, active recreation services, or passive recreation services, things like that?
What do you think of the increasing amount of money from developer and real estate interest financing campaigns?
Well, that was always a challenge that everybody had. Is you had development versus no growth or controlled growth. And when I campaigned, I did not take contributions from developers. Others did, and as my campaign expenses were much less than a lot of than the opposition that that was against me in many cases.
So if you, and I noticed that in almost every campaign you were in, you didn't spend as much money as the other candidates did, but you still won. Why do you think that was?
Well, some money does not necessarily get you elected. And I think that I had a lot of public support and was, had a good team working for me, and it was there were some close races and some that weren't so close. Mm-hmm. But it was it's definitely hopefully I did a good job.
What do you think of the emergence of independent political committees getting involved? Because when you first started, that was not a factor, but now the candidates have their own committees, and then there are independent groups who form committees who raise money also to influence the election.
Right, and that has been it's certainly a challenge, and what you end up having is, as the national requirements have changed for contributions to political committees, that has flowed down to the Arizona election requirements as well. But and the individual candidates are limited by the amount that can be contributed to their campaigns by individuals. But the independent political action committees don't necessarily have those requirements, and so they can get large contributions from single donors and use that to support their candidates or their issues. I think it's more supporting the issues than the candidates is where they have to fall in.
Yeah, you ran for re-election. Well, you ran for election, and then you were elected 2 more times. Then you were defeated the last time.
Right.
What changed the last time?
I think the economic conditions changed significantly. That was still 2010, and we were focused on getting through that recession, and the public was ready for a significant change.
Mm-hmm.
And so, fortunately, I lost in the primary and didn't have to go to the general election.
You have to raise any more money just to keep going. I think I gave you this question before, but I see in many newspaper articles, and I'm talking a long time back, and even fairly currently, a lot of times people say that they mistrust the town government. They are suspicious of the motives of the people running the government. What do you say to that?
I say they need to get more involved. They need to become more active. They need to look at the issues and investigate them further and see that, hey, the government is trying very hard to do what they feel is in the best interest of the community. And if they say that a change is necessary, then they can get more involved and promote those changes.
One thing that strikes me I've recently been doing a lot of research on the water issue, and it's very, very complicated. It's taken me a long time just to find all the information. But it strikes me that a lot of people frequently don't know the big picture. Officials do. I'm not even sure all the people in the government always know the issues, but I think they know a lot more because they've attended many meetings on an issue like water, so they kind of know all the limitations. You know, for example, the fact that Oro Valley was limited by, when they negotiated the water issue, they were limited by previous agreements made with Rancho Vista, so made with Tucson, other, and also what the water companies had made previous agreements with Tucson, and they bought the water company, so they were kind of stuck with what, had previously been decided.
Right.
So, I mean, how do you make something that complicated clearer to the general public?
Well, I think over time it has, basically the public has accepted the fact that the town owns the water companies, that the town provides excellent service as a result of that ownership that was not necessarily there when it was in private ownership. With respect to the town advantage of being the water provider is that it puts the town's destiny in their own hands. Mm-hmm. Whereas the water, in Arizona, water is more valuable than gold. If you don't have water, you're very limited in what you're able to do. And so that was one of the main drivers for the town getting the water companies, is that by owning the water company, by owning and providing the water service, we're able to manage the growth through that water service, and limit it where in some cases provided in other cases identify when that growth can take place because of a service that may not extend to that particular area, and when that service is provided. So that's a significant tool in the town's toolbox, but it also is a service that the town provides that is significant to the community as well.
One of the big controversies in, I guess, your second and third term as mayor was the policy of granting economic incentives to Oro Valley Marketplace, Oracle Crossings, the Rooney Ranch complex, Sheridan, etc. There were more than that. I can't think of them all. I think there were about 6 or 7 altogether.
Right.
There was a lot of public opposition to it, and eventually the town reversed. New people got on the council and they voted to eliminate it. And of course, then the Supreme Court in Arizona pretty much negated it a couple of years later. Why did the town get into economic incentives?
Well, that was a tool that you had to compete with other areas, especially if you were looking towards future growth, future needs of the community. Is, as I said when we were talking about taxes, the sales tax provides a significant portion of the town budget. And originally, when I moved to Oro Valley in '94, the only gas that you could get was at Circle K on Oracle Road. That was the only gas station.
That was, yeah, for many, many years.
For many years. And you had Smitty's and Smith's were the only 2 grocery stores. And you had really no department stores or other types of retail available in Oro Valley. So that when the Rooney Ranch area was developed, that was pretty much the first real shopping center that we had, and that was and getting in the Target and as a sales tax benefit. And then the further development helped out significantly. The challenges associated with the marketplace. While I was mayor, I saw 3 proposals came across my desk of developing that particular site, and 2 of them went away because of the cost to develop that site and what the overall requirements were. And even with incentives, they didn't pencil out. But we were on the marketplace. Basically, there was significant infrastructure that had to be put in. There was significant work that needed to be done, and
there was a lot of soil that had to be brought in.
A lot of soil that was brought in, all those costs made it expensive to develop. And ultimately, you can say, okay, we can be patient, and maybe one of these days that area will develop. With the incentives, we were able to get them to do the development and to move forward with it. And that was pretty much the case for the marketplace and for Oracle Crossings.
There were all kinds of predictions from the planning department of the amount of revenue that this would generate for the town. Obviously, in most cases, 40 to 45% of it went to the developers for a period of years. Do you know that, has the town ever done a follow-up to determine how much revenue is really coming in compared to the predictions? And I'm talking about the net amount for the town.
Well, over the long period of time, no. Initially, we got monthly or quarterly reports of what, basically what a development earned and what was spent. I don't know if they do that anymore or not. Or if there was ever any final report saying, okay, we finished this time period, and here's what they ended up getting versus what was forecast.
Were any of them given more than 10 years? I can't find out either, but someone told me that Oro Valley Marketplace's incentives just ended like in the last year.
They ended last year or the year before, and it seems to me that they were 15 or 20 years. 15 years, I think.
Okay. Again, that's another one of those things kind of hard to find.
It should be in the agreement.
Well, it would have been a modification because the original agreement was just 10 years. So at some point there was a modification of it.
Okay, and that would have been because of the recession.
In the recession.
As if there was, basically, there was a lot, the development didn't occur as quickly as they anticipated.
We talked a little bit before about annexations. The biggest single annexation of the town was Rancho Vistosa, which was 5 or 6 years before you got involved in the town. And then the second biggest proposal was Arroyo Grande, the land that is immediately north of Rancho Vistosa all the way up to the Canal County line. I've talked to a number of people about it. Some people thought it was a bad idea. Some people thought it was a good idea. Actually, listening to some people, it kind of changed my point of view after I heard a lot of the arguments about it. But, you know, in your view, at that time, what was it, why was it a good decision at that moment? I mean, not talking today, but then.
Well, it was a good idea in that it provided for your northern growth boundary up to the county line, and it was all state land, and that it would, and we were this close to having it happen, but it never did happen. What, in 2008, I guess it was, when the Obama administration hired the governor, Janet Napolitano, to be his Homeland Security Secretary. And Jane Hull took over as governor and reappointed the state land secretary, and and basically what they ended up doing is they put all annexations of state land on hold and changed what the overall requirements were going to be in order to annex state land. So that I think Arroyo Grande is for future annexation is still the most important annexation that Oro Valley can do. Mm-hmm. And it's undeveloped land that has some significant recreational and cultural assets. It has good commercial prospects and a good area for residential development and growth. And basically, when you annex undeveloped land, basically all the costs associated with that development benefit the community. Whereas when you're annexing existing land, then you are you're getting the requirements and the costs associated with supporting that existing land. So that if a residential area has streets and it's already populated, that the town may benefit financially, but it needs to immediately provide services to that annexation. Mm-hmm. Whereas if the area is undeveloped, like state land, like Arroyo Grande or the state land to the west of us, those areas don't require immediate services. The development will put in the initial roads and the initial infrastructure so that your town costs are minimized and your sales taxes, construction taxes go to you, so that or go to the town, so that you're able to build up a little bit of a bank to be able to provide the services that are necessary when that area grows, that area is developed.
From the articles I read, there was a promise from the town, that it's in the minutes of the town, that 50% of the land out there would remain open space.
Right.
Is that, this is just sort of is that a likely thing today? Or is once a promise like that made only at that time and it's not?
Well, because the agreement was never virtually signed, and the annexation never happened, and the requirements for the annexation have changed significantly, so that the proposal that included that 50% promise is really no longer applicable. It doesn't, no longer meets the state land standards of what they require necessarily.
Which would be a higher amount of development.
Right. Right. Is that they may feel that because the state land still owns the land when it's annexed.
Was there I'm sorry, go ahead.
And so that they are still interested in the highest, best use of that land so that they can make the most money for the schools. And people forget that, is that it's not, the land doesn't go to the town. The town simply has it within its corporate boundaries. The land is still owned by the state.
Was there a developer? So I've never quite understood how this all worked. The state was interested in selling it. The town was interested in annexing it. Was there already a developer who was interested in a layout, or was all the discussion of, where open space would be, et cetera, was that strictly the town, or was there a developer involved?
The developer was state land.
Okay.
As far as I know, there was no private developer involved. That it was the state land planning department.
So they would have waited until they put it up for auction.
Right. It was, and basically we would have promised certain densities, level of development in certain areas as open space, which we would have agreed to with the state, and the state would have agreed to, and that so that the areas would be developed accordingly.
Even with 50% land, our town's planning department was assuming a population up there of over 20,000 added to the town. Again, it's just an opinion of your part. Is there the water there for another 20,000 people with what we have and what's there?
Well, you'd have to get the CAP allotment from the state for that piece of land, for that land. It would be dependent upon that for. It's basically, that was one of the requirements that we had, was that the CAP allotment would have gone with the land rather than stayed with the state. The thought of 20,000 more residents, I think that would have been probably optimistic compared to, basically if you compare the estimate of what the planners said was going to go into Rancho Vistoso versus what it has developed at is much, much less.
You and I had briefly spoke before, and you mentioned a topic I don't have on my list, but I think it's kind of related to what you were just talking about, which was HOAs. HOAs came in Arizona actually in the 1960s, but I don't find any reference to an HOA in Oro Valley until the early 1980s. And of course, all of Rancho Vistoso was developed as HOAs. I mean, there's 70 different communities in Rancho Vistoso, and they each have their own HOA. And then there's an overriding HOA for the entire development. Why do you think the town permitted or encouraged, I'm not sure what the right word is, HOA development as a way of developing properties?
Well, it's the advantage of an HOA in a subdivision or in any sort of subdivision is that the HOA provides for the needs of that subdivision, whether and overall management of that that subdivision so that the town services are the next level up from the immediate needs of the community. And so that it's normal, I would say that the town provides fewer services to the areas that have HOAs than it does to areas that don't have HOAs.
And is that a permanent relationship? In other words, the roads, the parks, etc. Has it been true that once a park or a road system that's been developed with an HOA in our valley is the responsibility of the HOA, it stays that way forever?
It depends. It depends. Is that some HOAs believe, their roads are private and they provide the services for those roads. They may want to turn them over to the town, but if they do turn them over to the town, then that community no longer can be a gated community. Number one, as if the roads are public, then the public needs to have access to it. And so that your HOA provides that sense of privacy that some communities may want. And so that there's that balance there. The other issue is that if the town does have requirements for taking over private property, and some of those requirements, say for roads, is the road has to be at a certain service level, so that if it's all potholes, the potholes need to be fixed and repaired prior to the town taking over that road. As you can't just turn over a road to the town because it's all broken down because you don't want to service it. As you as the HOA have accepted that responsibility.
So when a developer comes to Oro Valley with a plan for the development of 30 acres and they're going to build houses on it, do they specify at that point that it's going to be an HOA, or is that something that develops later on when they sell to they have to let the buyers know they're buying into an HOA?
Yes, they do. And basically the HOA is normally part of the requirements that are investigated by the town, and the CC&Rs and stuff like that end up being approved as part of the final plat.
Okay, I'm down to my last couple of questions. I'm sure I can think of some other ones.
We've been doing good.
Do you think it's a good idea for the members of the council and the mayor to be paid a salary?
I think so. I think that it's still a voluntary job, and you don't go. The salary is pretty insignificant for the amount of time that you put into that job, and it is a stipend that I think if you didn't give them that stipend, you would be, as a town, you would be nickel and dime for a lot of additional costs, a lot of your mileage areas and things like that. You'd be reimbursing your council members for it. But right now, I think that they need to go back and look at the report that was done prior to having the salary, and that would have been 98, 99, 2000 time. It would have been before 2000, I think, because 2000, I think, was when it started.
Mm-hmm.
But it would have been the year before.
They had to vote, the public voted down the idea.
No.
Yes, it did. They had a referendum and the public voted it down.
That would have been a long time before.
Well, it was about 95, 96, somewhere in there. They voted it down. Among other things.
In Oro Valley?
Yes.
I don't know.
I'll send you the clipping.
It would have been the 80s. It would have been before 90. It would have been 94. Could have been 94. I don't remember. Is I know that Marana has done that, and the city of Tucson constantly is turning down their requests for salary increases. But I don't know. I don't remember going to the voters for a salary increase. We created a committee to examine it and make a recommendation. And that committee provided a report to the council, and that provided basically they examined cities and towns of our size and what they did, and then basically they made a recommendation that the mayor should get. I think it started at $750, and the council members should get $600. And then, and that they were not eligible to participate in the elected officials' retirement system. And, then after that, basically it was probably 4 or 5 years after that, after we approved providing the salaries, we added the inflation factor to it, where we said that the salaries for the mayor and council should be adjusted for inflation the way the rest of the town employees were. But that was the only thing I remember about there being the salary.
I'm just a couple of things that came. I don't know if I sent them on your original list because I thought of them later, but the wildlife bridge that was built up in along Oracle Road. Does the town own that little piece of land?
I don't think so. I think it's right away. It's Arizona State right away.
Okay.
It should be right away, and then for the other part of it was still Rancho Vistoso.
Arroyo Grande.
And on the Arroyo Grande side, it would be state land on part of it, and then the Arizona ADOT right away. The RTA paid for those.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was part of the RTA item. And I don't believe, I know the town did they manage the underpasses? They may have managed some of it, and they may have contributed to any of the overages. But I believe all the funds for the overpass and the underpasses were RTA funds. That I don't. There may have been a minor, and a couple $100,000 contributed by the town, but I don't recall. That was after my time. Was that we approved it, and we were planning on it during my time with the RTA. But the actual work was
12 or 14.
So the actual work was after I left. So I couldn't tell you exactly where the dollar.
Was that considered sort of part of the thinking of the development of Arroyo Grande?
No. As part of the development of Arroyo Grande, you had wildlife corridors identified from Big Wash, basically going to the Tortolitas. Because you had a wildlife corridor that had been identified from the Tortolitas to Big Wash, and then from Big Wash going across to the Catalinas. And oh, by the way, the crossings supported that in the future.
So if they weren't connected, how did it come about?
It came about as, there's always been a desire for to having a wildlife corridor between the Tortolita Mountains and the Catalina Mountains. And so as part of the RTA plan, when it was passed, it had an environmental portion of the RTA plan. And that included wildlife crossings for Oracle Road, for Tangerine Road, for Thornydale, and several down south. So that, that was all part of the RTA plan that was passed by the voters.
Okay. The last question is sort of, or last one or two questions, are things that I've asked almost everybody. In retrospect, what do you think Oro Valley has done right and done wrong? And I'm talking about looking back over all the years, not just your time.
Looking back, done right, it's developed in a quality manner that has been very good, and its public's participation has been very good. The thing that they did wrong was they never went after a property tax in the early years.
I'm sorry, the second part was?
They never proposed or tried to get a property tax in the early years.
Oh, in the early years.
As nowadays, I don't think, you certainly could not, I don't believe a property tax will ever pass in Oro Valley. And, they did not necessarily have to implement the property tax, but they should have gotten authority to do it. Because ultimately, when you reach build out, you're still going to have cost of services. And those costs are going to continue to grow. And I don't believe that your state shared revenue and your sales taxes are going to be adequate for the services that the community desires. So that some of those services are going to go away because you can't afford it. That's the challenge that I see in the future.
It's kind of the problem of democracy. People want things but don't want to pay for them.
Very true.
Yeah. Do you see any other challenges that the town faces with water or any other issues, that may come up in the future?
Well, I think water is going to, it's always going to be an issue. I think our plan is good. I think our future needs for our existing size town is adequate for the next 100 years. I believe that we were able to do that when we brought in the reclaimed water and when we brought in and we got the CAP. Because I think that, I don't believe that Oro Valley has a water issue. As much as people think that we do, if we have a water issue in Oro Valley, then all of Arizona is going to have a water issue. It's going to be because CAP is stopped or something like that. But, we do have a pretty strong aquifer. And, unfortunately, it's not as big as it could be, because you've got a couple of mountains that are isolating it. But there is a lot of water in the ground. At least that's what I was told.
Yeah, I do wonder about that because everyone, the aquifer here that they're talking about for the Tucson area runs from 10 or 20 miles north into Pinal County, all the way down to almost Nogales. You know, it's a huge area.
Right.
And you have lots of different entities that are tapping into that same aquifer.
Yeah.
And they're all claiming a 100-year assured supply.
Yep, and that's the challenge of it. Basically, for Oro Valley, you actually have two aquifers. You've got a shallow aquifer that is basically above the Catalina part, and then there's a second aquifer down below it. You got to go through a set of mountain outcroppings and to get to the second aquifer.
Mm-hmm.
And that, you know, so that you have a shallow one and a deep one, and the shallow one is the one that goes up and down all the time.
Right.
That you're drawing from, and that they're seeing recover right now is basically because conservation efforts that are going through and their use of CAP and the reclaimed water. Their aquifer, their wells are actually getting shallower, whereas down in Tucson, they're having to dig deep, and then basically up in Tortolita, they're going dry because they're going to have to tap the deeper one.
Mm-hmm.
So their shallow one is not as deep as ours, but basically the Tortolita areas, they're constantly having to dig their wells deeper.
Kind of like what's going on in California and Oregon right now.
Yeah.
Same kind of thing. Yeah. Okay, well, I thank you for taking the time to answer all these, and I know you thought about them in advance. I appreciate your comments, and you've certainly filled in a lot of little gaps and things, and given me an opinion, like other people have opinions of what they've seen happen over the years.
Well, if you need more, let me know. I'll be happy to help, because I know a lot of things happened during those 12 years.
You're not kidding. All right, thank you.
But it was a lot of different things, and there's significant changes in the community.